When I arrived in Japan 8 years ago, fresh off a plane from Nepal, I was ready to live the dream. I had studied Japanese for a few months and thought, how hard could this be? Spoiler alert, it was very hard. The next 8 years were full of language fails, cultural disasters, and embarrassing moments that looking back, I can only laugh at now. It all started on day one. My first meeting with my boss was a disaster. I had no idea whether to bow or shake hands. In Nepal, we'd probably just say namaste, but in Japan, the rules are different, so I decided to do both at the same time. I bowed deeply and stuck out my hand, accidentally punching him in the stomach. He laughed it off, but I spent the rest of the day trying to avoid eye contact. Then there was the language. Oh, Japanese. A beautiful language that sounds like music until you try to speak it. My first big mistake came at a restaurant. I was starving and wanted to say, I'm very hungry. Confidently, I said, Onaka ga sugoi, thinking I was nailing it. The waiter froze for a second, then smiled and nodded. Later, I learned I had said, my stomach is amazing. Imagine the poor waiter trying not to laugh while serving me. The grocery store was my personal battlefield. Back in Nepal, I could identify everything by sight. In Japan, everything looked familiar, but wasn't. One time, I grabbed what I thought was milk, only to take a sip and discover it was some kind of tofu drink. Another time, I bought a bag of sugar, or so I thought. It turned out to be salt, and I ruined an entire batch of cookies. But the worst betrayal? Natto. I saw a small package that looked like chocolate pudding and thought, oh, dessert! I was so excited. I took a big spoonful and immediately gagged. Fermented soybeans were not what I had signed up for. Public transport in Japan is incredible. Clean, quiet, and always on time. But it has unspoken rules. I didn't know them. On my first train ride, I got a call from my mom. Naturally, I answered and started chatting loudly in Nepali. Within seconds, the whole train turned to stare at me. A middle-aged man gave me the ultimate Japanese punishment, the long, disappointed side-eye. Later, I learned that talking on the phone in public is Renting an apartment in Japan was like a game show where the prize was disappointment. The host? A skeptical landlord. One landlord flat out told me, we don't rent to foreigners. I thought maybe it was a joke. It wasn't. When I asked why, he said, because foreigners don't follow the garbage rules. Garbage rules? Really? I couldn't believe it. Back in Nepal, garbage rules were simple. Pile it up until you can't anymore. But this was Japan, and I was determined to prove him wrong. I transformed into the king of garbage sorting. I memorized the schedule. Burnables on Monday, plastics on Wednesday, cans on Friday. I learned which bag to use for what and even Googled how to tie the perfect garbage knot. Eventually, I got an apartment, but I could feel the landlord's eyes burning into my trash bags every collection day. I'm pretty sure he inspected them like a detective looking for clues. Making friends was another game show, except this time, the prize was awkward silence. In Nepal, making friends is as easy as shouting, let's have tea. In Japan, people are polite but reserved. One time, I invited a coworker to dinner. She smiled and said, maybe next time. I thought, great, she's busy but interested, so I asked her again and again. By the fifth, maybe next time, I realized it actually meant, no thank you. At that point, she probably thought I was either clueless or trying to break some kind of persistence record. But my all-time favorite disaster happened during cherry blossom season. My coworkers invited me to hanami, flower viewing, which is basically a picnic under the sakura trees. It was beautiful. Everyone was drinking sake, laughing, and having a great time. I decided it was the perfect moment to practice my Japanese. I turned to my boss and said, your wife is very scary. Silence. His face froze. Everyone stopped drinking. I quickly realized my mistake. I had meant to say, your wife is very beautiful. In Japanese, kirei means beautiful. Bowing to a vending machine was probably one of my finest moments. The machine didn't bow back, of course, but I like to think it appreciated the respect. At this point, moments like that are just part of the ride. And you know what? I've learned to laugh at myself and enjoy every ridiculous twist and turn. If you're thinking of living in Japan, let me give you one piece of advice. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's impossible to get everything right, and honestly, the best stories come from the biggest mistakes. Just double-check that carton before you drink it. Never yell on trains, even if your team wins. And for the love of natto, learn how to tie a yukata the proper way. Trust me, your dignity will thank you later. If you're curious about Japan, the Japanese language, or its fascinating culture, don't forget to subscribe for more stories and laughs. Let's navigate this adventure together.